It was a night like any other, or so it seemed. The moon hung high, casting long, skeletal shadows across quiet suburban streets. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees. Inside their homes, families were tucked into their beds, dreaming of tomorrow, ordinary plans, simple joys. They felt safe. They felt secure. They believed the walls of their houses. They believed the laws of their land, an invisible shield protecting them from the darkness beyond the streetlights. They had no reason to think otherwise. After all, this was a place where nothing truly terrible ever happened. That comforting illusion was about to be shattered. The truth is, some evils don't announce themselves with a roar. They don't come barreling down the street with flashing lights. They creep. They slither into the cracks of our ordinary lives. This particular evil was patient. It watched. It learned the rhythms of the neighborhood, the comings and goings, the moments of vulnerability. It was a predator. The unsuspecting community was its hunting ground. On that fateful night, the world was blissfully unaware. A line was about to be crossed, a line from which there would be no return. The events would destroy lives. They would expose a gaping wound in the fabric of justice. They would force a nation to question the rules they lived by. There was only this silence. A heavy, pregnant silence filled with unspoken dread. It was the calm before a storm of unimaginable ferocity. Looking back, the signs might have been there, but on this night, everything was not fine. A terrible change was coming. This story is not just about a crime, it's about the moment everything changed. One act of unspeakable violence could send shockwaves to the highest courts. The laws we depend on are not carved in stone. They are written and rewritten in the wake of tragedy. They are forged in the fires of outrage and grief. This is the story of the crime that forced the hand of justice. It started on a quiet street, on a quiet night, with a single, terrible act. And after that, nothing and no one would ever be the same again. The sun rose the next morning on a scene of utter devastation. Yellow police tape stretched across the front yard, the house blurred behind it. The familiar, comforting neighborhood was now tainted, transformed into something alien. Neighbors gathered in small, hushed groups on the sidewalk, faces etched with shock, faces showing disbelief, faces registering a dawning, sickening fear. The crime was like a stone, dropped into a still pond. The immediate impact was violent and shocking, a splash that soaked those closest to it in grief and horror. But the ripples spread outward, wider and wider, touching lives far beyond the manicured lawns of that single, terrified neighborhood. First, it was the local news. Then the story was picked up by regional outlets. A collage of black and white newspaper headlines from the era. Shock, horror, manhunt visible. It began with a sound that should have been innocent. A knock on the door. Not a frantic banging, not a splintering crash, but a firm, deliberate rap on the wood that cut through the quiet of the night. Inside the small, modest house, a young woman was startled from her half-sleep. The city of Phoenix, Arizona, in March of 1963 felt like a safe place to her. It was a place of sun and growth, not of hidden monsters. That comforting belief was her first and last mistake. Every instinct screamed at her not to open it, to run, to call for help. He forced his way inside, the sound of the splintering door jamb lost to the sleeping street. Her screams were swallowed by the walls, her struggle a desperate silent ballet against an overwhelming force. His name was Ernesto Miranda. The young woman, broken but alive, eventually managed to free herself. Her first call was not to a friend, but to the police. The investigation began in the harsh light of a new day, but it was shrouded in darkness. Phoenix detectives descended upon the violated home, led by investigator Carol Cooley. They brought the tools of their trade, fingerprint dust, evidence bags, a heavy sense of purpose. She gave a description: Hispanic male, late 20s, slender but strong. In 1963, forensic science was far different. No DNA testing, no computerized databases. For Cooley and his team, the case consumed them. They worked long hours, fueled by black coffee, grim determination. The break they had been praying for came from sharp eyes and a brother's protective instinct. It was a 1953 Packard, green and beat up, with a white top. It matched the description his sister had given. The vehicle was registered to a man a few blocks away, the name Ernesto Arturo Miranda. She scanned the four men. She hesitated, uncertain. She said Miranda resembled the attacker most, but could not make a positive ID. They led Ernesto Miranda into interview room number 2. It was a small, stark space designed to make a suspect feel isolated and overwhelmed. They did not tell him he could have a lawyer present. They did not tell him he had the right to remain silent. They told Miranda falsely that the victim had positively identified him. Miranda's composure finally broke. He signed the statement, then in his own handwriting wrote out a detailed confession below it. They believed the case was airtight. They had no way of knowing the confession they had just worked so hard to obtain was built on a legal foundation of sand. With Ernesto Miranda's signed confession in hand, prosecutors in Maricopa County believed they had an open and shut case. The confession was the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, a powerful piece of evidence that seemed to render all other arguments moot. He was quiet, seemingly confused by the complex legal proceedings swirling around him. A tiny crack was about to appear in the prosecution's seemingly impenetrable wall of evidence, a crack that would eventually widen into a chasm. His name was Alvin Moore. He was a 73-year-old attorney. He cross-examined Detective Cooley, forcing him to admit on the stand that he had not advised Miranda of his right to have an attorney present. In the end, the trial judge sided with the prosecution. He ruled the confession admissible. The court clerk read Miranda's chilling handwritten account of the attack out loud. The words filled the silent courtroom. After a short deliberation, the jury came back with its verdict: guilty. The judge sentenced him to 20 to 30 years in prison. Moore immediately filed an appeal with the Arizona Supreme Court. His argument stayed the same. In a unanimous decision, they upheld Miranda's conviction, saying that as long as the confession was given voluntarily, it was admissible. Prominent Phoenix civil liberties attorney named Robert Corcoran, John P. Frank, John J. Flynn. They decided to do something bold. They would appeal the case to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court of the United States. To the astonishment of many, the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case. The swell of public outrage revealed a deep and stark division within American society. On one side were the proponents of law and order. For them, community safety outweighed the procedural rights of a confessed criminal. On the other side was a smaller but equally passionate coalition of civil liberties advocates, legal scholars, and social justice activists. The backlash was immediate and intense. The case became a political football. As the date for oral arguments at the Supreme Court approached, the tension surrounding the case reached its peak. On June 13, 1966, this was the day of judgment. It was a landmark 5-4 ruling. Chief Justice Earl Warren authored the majority. The court found these tactics to be compulsion, violating the spirit of the Fifth Amendment, so procedural safeguards were required. A person in custody had to be informed of their rights in a way they could understand. Justice Byron White wrote a scathing dissent. He warned the decision would bring fewer confessions and a higher crime rate. The decision effectively overturned Ernesto Miranda's conviction. The case was sent back to Arizona for a new trial. In the wake of the Supreme Court's landmark decision, a new and urgent task fell to law enforcement. They needed to figure out exactly what to say, that they have the right to remain silent, that anything they say can be used against them in court, that they have the right to an attorney, and that if they cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for them. The Miranda warning became a cultural icon, a ritual so familiar that many citizens could recite the words by heart. During the second trial, they called Miranda's former girlfriend to the stand. She testified that Miranda had confessed the details of the crime to her. In 1967, Ernesto Miranda was convicted of kidnapping and rape for a second time. He was eventually paroled in 1972. Then, in January 1976, he was stabbed to death during a fight in a downtown Phoenix bar. They read the Miranda rights to the man suspected of murdering Ernesto Miranda. The cycle had come full circle. The story of the crime that changed the law leaves us with an enduring warning. It warns us that the rights we cherish are fragile. The Miranda warning is a shield. It is a shield for the innocent, a shield for the ignorant, and yes, it is a shield for the guilty. We should remember the young woman whose life was shattered, the lawyers who dared to challenge the status quo, leaving him to his tragic fate, a ghost forever haunting the legal doctrine that bears his name.